The moment fans never knew about didn't happen on screen, and that is precisely why it matters. During early discussions for what was intended to be a pivotal scene, a decision was made quietly, without press releases or explanations. The scene was intense, emotionally volatile, and designed to reshape how audiences understood the relationship at the core of the story. Yet it never progressed beyond the planning stage. The reason had nothing to do with budgets, logistics, or scheduling conflicts. The choice came from Caitriona Balfe herself. According to those familiar with the process, she refused to perform the scene once she realized that its emotional weight would not end with the script. This was not a casual objection or a passing creative disagreement. It was a deliberate pause, rooted in concern over how the moment would land on her scene partner. That partner, of course, was Heughan. At the time, the production was under immense pressure. The storyline was cresting toward a peak, expectations were soaring, and every scene was being assessed for maximum emotional impact. The proposed moment was crafted to push boundaries, forcing the characters into a confrontation with lasting emotional consequences. On paper, it worked. In practice, Caitriona sensed that something about it went too far. What made the situation especially complex was the nature of their working relationship. Years of collaboration had created trust, rhythm, and an unspoken understanding of limits. That closeness can elevate performances, but it can also blur the line between acting and personal impact. Caitriona recognized that this scene, if played as written, could reach something too raw. The risk was not artistic failure, but emotional harm. Rather than escalate the issue publicly, she chose discretion. There were no on-set confrontations, no dramatic refusals, no ultimatums framed as creative demands. She simply stated that she would not perform the scene as designed. Her reasoning was not about discomfort or fear, but about responsibility. She did not want a moment engineered to shock audiences to leave a real and lasting mark behind the camera. That decision caught parts of the creative team off guard. In large productions, refusing a key scene can be seen as disruptive or uncooperative. Yet in this case, the response was measured. Conversations followed, alternatives were explored, and the storyline was adjusted without drawing attention. The scene disappeared quietly, and most viewers never suspected anything had been removed. Fans continued watching, unaware that a more extreme version of the story had almost existed. The emotional beats still landed, just without the added intensity that scene would have delivered. In hindsight, many argue the narrative benefited from that restraint. But at the time, the choice was not about storytelling efficiency. It was about protecting a colleague from an emotional collision neither actor could fully control. What makes this revelation so powerful is how completely invisible it remained. No interviews hinted at creative tension. No behind-the-scenes footage suggested a shift. Caitriona never spoke about it publicly, and Sam never acknowledged it either. The silence wasn't secrecy, it was discretion. Some decisions are meant to vanish once they've served their purpose. Only later did the significance of that refusal begin to surface. Fans who learned about it were forced to reconsider what strength in acting actually looks like. Sometimes it isn't about going further, darker, or louder. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stop. That awareness demands experience, empathy, and the confidence to choose restraint over spectacle. The scene that never happened now carries its own weight. It stands as a moment where emotional intelligence overruled dramatic temptation. Caitriona's refusal wasn't a rejection of the story, but a commitment to the people telling it. And while audiences never saw the scene, its absence speaks volumes about the unseen choices that shape what ultimately reaches the screen. The impact of that decision only became clear much later, when people began to understand what had been avoided rather than what had been lost. Refusing a key scene in a major production is no small act, especially when everything is built around emotional escalation. It means accepting that the story will change and that viewers may never know why. In this case, the change was invisible, but its motivation was deeply human. For Caitriona Balfe, the refusal was not about limiting art, but about defining its boundaries. Years of experience had taught her how easily emotional realism can spill beyond performance. When actors work closely over long periods, their instincts sharpen, but so does their awareness of each other's vulnerabilities. She recognized that the proposed scene risked crossing from portrayal into impact. That awareness came not from fear, but from responsibility. Working opposite Heughan for so long had built a rare professional trust. They understood how to push each other on screen while protecting what existed off it. In that context, Caitriona's choice reads less as resistance and more as collaboration. She wasn't saying no to the story. She was saying yes to the partnership that made the story possible. This distinction is where opinions begin to divide. Some fans argue that actors should always serve the script, regardless of discomfort, and that emotional risk is simply part of the job. From that perspective, avoiding such moments weakens the final product. Others see Caitriona's decision as a form of strength rarely acknowledged in the industry. Choosing restraint, especially when escalation is rewarded, requires confidence and clarity about personal limits. The production itself offers an important clue. The revised storyline still resonated with audiences. The emotional stakes remained high, but they unfolded with greater subtlety. What might have been a single explosive moment became a quieter, more sustained build of tension. Many viewers later described these episodes as more affecting precisely because they did not rely on shock. That outcome reframes the original refusal. Rather than diminishing the narrative, the absence of the scene may have preserved its integrity. It prevented the story from tipping into excess and protected the actors from carrying unnecessary emotional weight beyond the frame. What's especially striking is how deliberately the decision was kept private. There was no attempt to turn it into a statement or a badge of principle. Caitriona did not mention it in interviews, and Sam did not allude to it in later reflections. The silence suggests the choice was never meant to be admired. It was simply the right call at the time. That quietness is precisely why fans never knew. Only when fragments of the story emerged did people begin to appreciate how much effort goes into protecting performances from unintended harm. Acting is often framed as fearless vulnerability, but there is another kind of courage involved in saying no. It is the courage to recognize that some emotional territory does not need to be explored to be understood. This moment also reveals a broader truth about long-running collaborations. When actors share years of work, they develop an instinct for each other's limits that outsiders rarely see. That instinct becomes a form of care, operating quietly behind the scenes and leaving no visible trace. Audiences see chemistry, but they rarely see the negotiations that preserve it. In the end, the refused scene stands as an invisible marker of respect. It reminds us that the most meaningful creative choices are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes they are the decisions that never make it into the final cut, yet shape everything around them. Caitriona's refusal was not an act of avoidance, but an act of protection. And in a world built on emotional exposure, that kind of protection is a powerful form of integrity.